Hello everybody, welcome back to Maths. This session we're going to be looking into percentages without a calculator, but before we get there, if you could be so kind and click that subscribe button and also hit the like button just so we can push this video out to more people. So let's get cracking then. Percentages without a calculator. First of all, let's think about what does percentage mean. Well, percentage means out of 100, so out of 100%. So for example, if I were asked to figure out 50%, what would I need to do to be able to calculate 50% of something? Well, what we need to do here is we need to divide by 2. So if I asked you to figure out 50% of 60, you would just simply divide it by 2. Okay, what happens if we're asked to figure out, let's say, something like 25%? Well, this is going to be, well, there's a couple of different ways we could do this. We could either, number one, just divide straight through by 4, because some things you can divide through by 4 relatively easy. Or what you could do, make life easier, half it and then half it again. It's up to you which one you use to get the same answer. Anyway, so that's 50%, that's 25%. What else could we do? Let's do 75%. Now this one, there's loads of different ways, but I want you to pick your favorite. Okay, so for this one, what we could do is let's divide it by 4, because dividing by 4 gives us 25%. But notice that we can get from 25 to 75 by multiplying by 3. So let's do the same here and divide by 4 and then times by 3. Another thing you could do is you could calculate 50%, calculate 25%, and then add them together. That would also be a reasonable way to do things. I think the first way is easier, but again, as I say, it's totally up to you how you want to do this. So we've got 50, we've got 75, we've got 25. I think the next reasonable one to know and make sure we learn off by heart is 10%. So 10% is divide by 10. Okay, let's now go to 5%. If I want to figure out 5%, what we need to do for this one is we can divide by 10, which will figure out 10%, but then afterwards we need to divide by 2, and that will work out 5%. And the last one I want you guys to know is 1%. So 1% is just going to be, so a couple of ways to do this. You can either straight away divide this through by 100, or you could divide by 10 and then divide by 10 again. As I say, totally up to you which way you want to do things. So let's start to build these percentages. So for example, we know 10%. Let's just jot this in. We know 10% means divide by 10. What if I wanted 20%? Are we happy then that we need to divide by 10 to figure out 10% and then times it by 2 because it's double, isn't it? What about if I asked you guys for 60%? Well, that would be divide by 10 and then times by 6. So can you see the pattern there? So 20% is you work out 10% times by 2. 60%, you work out 10% by dividing by 10, then times it by 6 to get 60%. And you can do this with a number of different examples. So 90%, we can divide by 10, then times by 9. There are some other things we can do, like 90%, for example, we could just work out 10%, then take it away from the original number. That would be fine, but I just don't think there's much point in doing that way. And exactly the same works for 1%, because we know that 1% is divided by 100. So if I asked you to figure out 6%, we would divide by 100 to find 1% and then multiply by 6, and that would work out 6%. So lots and lots of different ways we can do these kind of things. So I'm going to give you guys an example. So let's say I want to work out, I'm going to do these with easy numbers just so we can see that they're correct. So I want you guys to work out 42% of 200. Now I know some of you might be sat there thinking, well, I can just double the 42. That's fine, but I'm just doing this so the numbers work out nice and easier so we can totally see. Okay, so I want to work out 42%. So I'm thinking, how do I get the 40 first? So I'm going to start by working out 10%, and then I can scale up to 40%, and that would work as well, wouldn't it? So to work out 10%, I'm going to have to do 200 divided by 10, and that is going to give me 20. So 20 is 10%, but we want 40%. So I'm going to have to take the 20 and times it by 4, and that will therefore give us 80. Okay, so I've worked out 40, so I need this bit here. Next, we want to work out the 2%. So let's work out 1% first, and then let's scale up to 2%. So 1%, we're going to take the 200, divide by 100, because we know that divide by 100 is 1%. That's going to give us 2. Okay, but then we want 2%. So we're going to take the 2 we just worked out, and we're going to multiply it by 2, and that's going to give us 4. So the final thing to know is, well, we want 42%, which is, we can get that by adding the 40% and the 2%, which means we're after the 80 and the 4. So we can just say this is 80 plus 4, and therefore this is 84. So this would be 84. Okay, let's do one more example, make sure we've definitely got this. So let's say something like, and I'm just going to make a number, 87% of 300. Again, I know we can see that 100% to 300%, we can just times it by 3, but this is purely for the purpose of making the numbers easier whilst we do these calculations. So 80%. Some of you might just want to work out 20% and times it by 4. I think it's so much easier. Always go down to 10% and then scale up to the 80. Okay, makes life easier. You don't have to, but it makes life easier. 7%. Well, let's do 1% and then let's do 7%. So let's work out these. So I want the 80% and I want the 7%. So let's first work out this 10%. 300 to get 10%, you just divide by 10, so that's going to give us 30. But then for 80, I want to do the 30 times by 8. Well, 3 times by 8 gives us 24. We're missing that 0, so drop it on the end, and this is the one we're looking out for. 1% means divide by 100. So 300 divided by 100 gives us 3. We then take that 3 and we times that by the 7, and that's going to give us 21. So the final thing is, we know we need the 80%, which is 240. We need the 21, which is the 7%. Add that on the end, and that's going to give us 261. And that's it. That's all we need to do. So because we're looking at percentages without a calculator, it might be worth dropping on the end of this, having a look at increase and decrease. So I'm just going to do one example because I'm going to do a video on this a bit later. So let's say, for example, I don't know, there's a hat in Primark or something which costs 30 quid, it's mega expensive for some reason, and we're going to drop this in price by 20%. So let's see how to do this. Let's first of all work out 20% of 30, okay? So I want to work out 20% of 30. Remember, this is without a calculator. So 20%, well, first of all, let's work out 20% here. Let's do this over here. So first of all, let's work out 10%. So 10% is going to be divided by 10, which is going to give us 3, isn't it? Then let's times that by 2 to get 20%, which is going to be equal to 6. So we know that 20% is equal to 6. The second thing to do now is we've been asked to decrease 30 by 20%. So 30 by 20%. But we know 20% is 6. So we're asked to decrease 30 by the 6, which is of course going to give us £24. Okay, let's do one final example. Let's pick another random number, 40 quid, and this time we're going to increase £40 by 15%. Don't know why, don't know what for reason, but we're just going to increase that by 15%. So, first thing, we need to figure out what is 15% of £40. Okay, let's work that out. So, first off, I want to figure out 10% of 40. 10% of 40 is 4 because it's divided by 10, isn't it? But then I want this 5%. So 5%, do you remember at the start of the video we said for 5% is you work out 10%, then you half it. So because we've already written down 10%, let's just half that and get 2. So to get 15%, so 15% here is the 10 plus the 5, so 4 plus the 2, which is going to give us 6. Okay, the second part, it says we're increasing £40 by 15%. So increase means we're going to add it on. 15% we worked out as 6, so it's the 40 plus the 6, and that's therefore going to give us £46. Okay, I'm hoping you guys found this video super useful. So yeah, if you did find this useful, please make sure you subscribe to the channel, click that like button as well, and also if you want to get yourself a free maths lesson, you can head over to mrsmilemaths.co.uk and you can get yourself a free maths lesson. And if you want the next lesson for free, obviously click on this video here. Cheers everyone, speak soon.